I guess as well, we'll come back to Leipzig because you alluded to it there. They have done a lot of very impressive stuff in the simple football terms as well. Liverpool and many other clubs have sort of tapped into what they've been able to do in terms of player development. Obviously, the Red Bull group, by and large, have been very impressive at that as well. We've had numerous Leipzig or Salzburg former players now on our books. But on the start of the season, Kev, they're currently second behind Bayern. They won at the weekend. They beat Mainz 2-0, actually. They were beaten by Atletico in the Champions League. And I've seen a tweet you put out over the weekend, maybe before I messaged you about this, just generally sort of waxing lyrical about RB Leipzig in the start of the season.
Yeah, certainly in the league. In the league, they've been very solid. They've only conceded a couple of goals. They've kept clean sheets in all but one of their games. They're the only team in Germany to have beaten Leverkusen since the start of last season. I mean, just let that sink in, a season and a bit. They're the only team that's beaten them. Obviously, Atalanta did in the Europa League final. And they look a bit more consistent than they have been. Consistency has always been the issue. If they are going to challenge for the league, they're going to have to make a big leap in terms of what they've done historically, because they're generally about, I think the average is 17 points shy of where they need to be to win the league. But they've got all the ingredients. They've got Willi Orban, who I think is a hugely underrated centre-back. I think he's one of the best defenders in German football and has been for a few years now, a real leader. He was absolutely sensational at the weekend. They've got midfield strength. Amadou Aidara is having a really good start to the season. Lots of options in there. And then you look at the forward areas. Xavi, when he's on his game and he's not moaning, he's a brilliant player to watch, really creative, makes goals, scores goals, really difficult to contain. And the front two, Lois Openda and Benjamin Šeško, even though Šeško didn't have a great day at the weekend, they are dangerous, no doubt about it. And so I don't think they've shown their best in the Champions League so far. If you look at the game in Madrid, I thought they were a bit unlucky to lose, lost to a very late goal. I think a draw would have been a fair result. And the game against Juventus was a huge blow because they were a goal up, they were a man up. They should really have gone on and won the game. And yet they somehow contrived to lose 3-2. So they're under pressure going into this game against Liverpool. So I think we haven't seen the best of them at the top level, but in the Bundesliga, they've done really well.
Yeah, most definitely. It's been a very impressive start. As you say, certainly beating Leverkusen, which was nigh on, if not completely impossible last season. So, yeah, absolutely, and very impressive. Just in terms of stylistically and how they go about their business then, Kev, is it sort of more of the same as we come to expect from the Red Bull clubs and in particular Leipzig?
Yeah, very, very fast in attack, very dynamic. They play that 4-box-2 formation, so it's effectively 4-2-2-2. What was quite interesting, actually, at the weekend, you often see Xavi drift off to the left, but we didn't see that, actually, at the weekend. We saw him playing kind of inside right at sometimes, which is unusual. And they get their width from the wings. Now, what I mean by that is it's the fullbacks coming forward, so the wider players actually play quite narrowly. They've had a real setback recently. David Raum, who's their left back, who is a really good attacking fullback, right up there with Germany's best. He's had ankle surgery and he's going to be out for a few weeks now. So that's a real problem because they've got to work out who's going to play on the left. What they did at the weekend was they had Castello Jr. play that left back role and he effectively tucked in as a third centre back. And they tried to get a bit of width on the other side. I don't know how sustainable that is. Benjamin Henrichs is a very good right back, so he gives them a bit of width on that side. But I'll be really interested to see what they do against Liverpool because the temptation would be to actually keep Castello Jr. there to deal with Mo Salah because they're going to need to try and contain him, as difficult as we know that is. So that's a problem for them. But lots of pace. Openda will try and run in behind all the time. Šeško is a bit of a unicorn in the sense that he's big, he's good in the air, but he's quick as well. And Xavi will try and get between the lines. He'll try and pick up those pockets of space where he can turn and really do damage. So, yeah, the Red Bull style that we're used to, but Marco Rose has kind of put his own little twist on it.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, you mentioned there they've clearly got plenty of attacking threats. Who would you sort of pinpoint as the main danger man from a Liverpool point of view? Would it be Šeško? He's the one that gets the majority of the goals, I would imagine.
I think Openda's more dangerous, personally. I think Openda's more consistent. Šeško could be a bit hot and cold. I think Šeško's got the highest ceiling. I think in 2, 3, 4 years, you might see Šeško as one of the best strikers in European football, but he's not quite there yet. Openda is the more dangerous player for me. Xavi is the one that is the supply line. He's the one that's always picking up free kicks. I do think with him, and I do think a little bit about Openda in this way as well. I think if you can upset them, you can put them out of the game to some extent. Xavi is constantly moaning, constantly complaining about decisions and, seemingly having a go at teammates. But I think I don't even think that's a negative thing necessarily. I just think that's the way he pushes himself. So I think physically you can upset him a bit. I'll be interested to see if Van der Slot does that. And I think that's really what you're looking at. But they can do damage in other ways. Christoph Baumgartner's a player I've always really liked. He will probably be a sub, but I mean, he can do real damage from that kind of 10 role alongside Xavi. So yeah, they've got some real quality all the way through the team.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. You mentioned one injury a moment ago, Kevin, in Varm, the left back. Have you got anybody else that potentially missing for this one? Any key absentees that you know of?
I think they're okay. Szoboszlai has been out for a while, so he's not going to be involved. He's a very solid midfielder, but they've got cover to deal with that. They've actually made a couple of really good signings, I think, in the summer. They brought in Arthur Vermeeren, who's a young Belgian player on loan from Atletico Madrid. He's looked really neat and tidy in that midfield area. He's getting better all the time. And they also signed a player that's been linked with Liverpool, actually, a fair bit, Charles Hertrauder, who's a guy who's come in from Feyenoord, can play as a fullback, can play as a centre-back. And he's looked pretty solid as well so far as well. So they've strengthened that squad. It's quite a rare summer for them. They didn't lose multiple players, really. The only one they lost was Dani Olmo, and they got big money for him. And he's obviously a bit injury prone. So I think that was a deal they were prepared to do. But in general, they kept everybody else.
Pretty clean bill of health as well. Then obviously Arne Slot will know Gertrude very well, I'm certain. So if he is playing, I'm sure he'll have a plan in mind to how to sort of nullify what he can bring to the party. Just finally, you are the perfect man, Kev, to ask this question to, being your Liverpool knowledge and Leipzig knowledge. How do you think this one might go? You don't need to give a prediction, but just generally speaking, how do you think the game's going to pan out? What will it look like?
Yeah, I think Liverpool will try to manage the game in a similar way to what they did against Chelsea on Sunday, in the sense that they won't want the game to be transitional. They won't want it to open up and be a shootout, because if it is, that's where you allow Leipzig to have moments where they can be really dangerous.